Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UE's horizon, watching the stars through the main screen. His ship was 3 days out from Earth, exploring the outer edges of the Proxima system. The mission was simple: find new worlds that humans could visit and maybe live on someday. Jake had been doing this job for 5 years, and he loved every minute of it. The crew was small but good. Lisa Carter worked the navigation systems, always finding the best routes through space. Danny Rodriguez handled communications, talking to Earth and other human ships. Pete Johnson took care of the engines, making sure they could travel faster than light. Amy Walsh was their science officer, studying everything they found. Jake trusted all of them with his life. "Captain, I'm getting some strange readings," Amy said from her station. She was looking at her screen with a worried face. "There are 3 ships coming toward us, but they're not human ships." Jake felt his heart beat faster. Humans had never met aliens before, though everyone knew they might be out there somewhere. "How far away are they?" he asked. "About 10 minutes if they keep coming at the same speed," Lisa answered. She was already working to change their course. "Should we try to run?" Jake thought for a moment. These could be friendly aliens who just wanted to say hello, but they could also be dangerous. "Try to contact them first, Danny. Let's see if they want to talk." Danny worked at his controls, sending signals on every frequency he knew. "I'm trying everything, Captain, but they're not answering." "Wait, I'm getting something." He listened through his headphones, then looked up with fear in his eyes. "It's not words, but it sounds angry." The alien ships were getting closer now. Jake could see them on the screen. They were big and dark, with sharp edges that looked like weapons. They didn't look like ships built for peace. "All right, everyone. Lisa, get us out of here as fast as you can. Pete, give us all the power you've got." The horizon turned and started to run, but it was too late. Green beams of light shot out from the alien ships, hitting the human vessel. The lights on the bridge went out for a moment, then came back on dim and flickering. Alarms started ringing everywhere. "They hit our engines," Pete shouted over the noise. "We can't go to light speed anymore." "Weapon systems are down too," Danny reported. "We can't fight back." Jake watched as the alien ships surrounded them. They were trapped with nowhere to go. "Everyone stay calm," he said, trying to sound brave even though he was scared. "Maybe they just want to board us and talk." But when the aliens came through their airlock, Jake knew this wasn't going to be a friendly meeting. The creatures were huge, almost 8 feet tall, with bodies covered in hard shells like giant insects. They had 4 arms each, all holding weapons that hummed with energy. Their faces were hidden behind masks, but their eyes glowed red in the darkness. The aliens moved fast and knew exactly what they were doing. They shot Lisa first when she tried to reach for an emergency button. She fell to the floor and didn't get up. Then he tried to hide behind his station, but one of the creatures found him and killed him too. Pete ran toward the engine room, but he didn't make it past the door. Amy was the last one left besides Jake. She stood next to him, shaking with fear. "Please," she said to the aliens, "we just wanted to explore. We weren't trying to hurt anyone." One of the aliens stepped forward. It was bigger than the others, with more decorations on its shell. It looked at Amy for a moment, then raised its weapon. The beam hit her in the chest, and she collapsed next to the others. Jake closed his eyes, waiting for his turn to die. But the shot never came. When he opened his eyes again, the big alien was standing right in front of him. It reached up and took off its mask, showing a face that looked like a cross between a lizard and a spider. Its mouth moved, and words came out in perfect English. "You are the last one, human," the alien said. Its voice was deep and rough, like rocks grinding together. "I am Zekthol, captain of this raiding fleet. Your friends died because they were weak and useless, but you might have value." Jake tried to speak, but his mouth was too dry. Finally, he managed to ask, "What do you want from me?" Zekthul showed its teeth in what might have been a smile. "Your species is new to us. We have been watching your ships for some time, learning about you. You humans are weak and slow, with no natural weapons or armor, but the galaxy always hungers for new entertainment." Entertainment? Jake didn't understand what the alien meant. "The arena of champions on Vorthik Prime," Zekthul explained. "For 3,000 years, the strongest warriors from every species have fought there for the pleasure of the Imperium. Your people will provide fresh sport for the crowds." Jake felt sick as he realized what was happening. "You're going to make me fight to the death for fun?" "If you survive long enough for it to be fun," Zekthul said with another horrible smile. "Most new species die in their first match. The betting pools are already opening on how quickly you will fall." The other aliens grabbed Jake's arms and dragged him toward their ship. As they pulled him away from the horizon, he took one last look at his crew lying dead on the bridge. Lisa, Gani, Pete, and Amy had all trusted him to keep them safe, and he had failed them. Now he was alone, millions of miles from Earth, about to be thrown into some alien gladiator ring. But as the airlock closed behind him, Jake made a promise to himself and to his dead friends. He might be weak and slow compared to these aliens, but he wasn't going to make it easy for them. If they wanted entertainment, he would give them something they would never forget. The journey to Vorthik Prime took 2 weeks in the alien ship's holding cell. Jake spent the time in a metal box barely big enough for him to lie down. The aliens gave him water and some kind of gray paste that tasted like dirt but kept him alive. Every day he did push-ups and sit-ups in the tiny space, trying to stay strong for whatever was coming. When the ship finally landed, Jake was dragged out into bright sunlight that hurt his eyes. Vorthik Prime was like nothing he had ever seen. The sky was purple, and 3 moons hung in the air, even during the day. Huge towers reached up toward the clouds, covered in flashing lights and moving pictures. But the biggest thing was right. In front of him, the arena of champions was a massive circle of stone and metal that could probably hold 500,000 people. It was so tall that Jake had to bend his neck all the way back to see the top. Even from outside, he could hear the roar of the crowd watching some fight going on inside. Zekthul pushed Jake toward a small door at the base of the arena. "Welcome to your new home, human. Try not to die too quickly. I have money riding on you, lasting at least 3 minutes." The door led to stairs going down into the ground. Jake walked deeper and deeper underground until they reached a level full of cages and cells. The air smelled like sweat, blood, and fear. This was where the gladiators lived, between fights. An alien that looked like a walking tree, with too many arms, came over to meet them. Its bark-like skin was covered in scars, and its voice sounded like wind through leaves. "Another new fighter, Zekthul? This one looks even weaker than the last batch." "This is Thokmar, the arena master," Zekthul told Jake. "He will decide when and how you die. Be respectful." Thokmar walked around Jake, looking at him like he was judging a piece of meat. "A human, I hear. Your species was just discovered, yes? No one knows anything about how you fight." The tree thing made a sound like breaking branches, which might have been laughter. "The crowds will love watching something new get torn apart." Jake was given a cell at the end of a long row. It had a bed, a toilet, and nothing else. Through the bars, he could see other cells holding creatures from across the galaxy. Some looked almost human, while others were so strange he couldn't figure out which. And was the head dot in the cell next to him was something that looked like a giant lizard walking on its back legs. It was at least 7 feet tall and covered in green scales. When it saw Jake, it came over to the bars that separated their cells. "I am Gorvex of the Saurian Empire," the lizard said in a deep, growling voice. "I have won 12 fights in this place. What are you supposed to be?" "I'm Jake. I'm human." "Human." Gorvex tested the word like it tasted bad. "Never heard of your kind. You look soft and weak. No claws, no fangs, no natural armor. How are you supposed to fight anything?" Before Jake could answer, something fast and black dropped down from the ceiling. It had 6 legs, sharp claws, and eyes like black marbles. "A new plaything," it said in a voice like clicking insects. "I am Veltar of the Hiver Swarms. I have killed 43 opponents with these." Claws. It showed Jake its hands, which ended in razor-sharp points. "Your pink skin will slice open so easily." A third voice joined the conversation, this one sounding like it came from a machine. "Combat analysis indicates minimal threat level from new specimen." Jake looked around and saw a creature that was half living flesh and half metal parts. Red. Lights blinked where its eyes should be. "I am Nexus 7 from the synthetic worlds. My combat algorithms predict your survival time at 1.7 minutes against average opposition." Jake sat down on his bed and looked at his new neighbors. They were all bigger, stronger, and more dangerous than him. They had natural weapons he could never match. But they were also telling him exactly how they thought and what they could do. That might be useful information someday. Over the next few days, Jake learned how life worked in the gladiator cells. Every morning, Thokmar would choose fighters for the day's matches. The winners got better food and sometimes even prizes from the crowd. The losers died in the sand above their heads. Jake was not chosen for the first 3 days. Instead, he was put to work cleaning the cells and carrying food to the other fighters. Thokmar gave him the worst jobs and the oldest, most broken equipment. When he finally got to train, the training area was a smaller version of the arena above, with sand on the floor and practice weapons on the walls. Jake picked up a sword that was dull and had a crack in the blade. The shield he was given had a hole in the middle. The other fighters got the good weapons and laughed at him, but Jake had something they didn't expect. He watched everything and everyone, learning how each species fought. Gorvex was strong and tough, but he got tired quickly when he couldn't end a fight fast. Veltar was incredibly quick, but she always attacked the same way, going for the throat. First, Nexus 7 was precise and calculated, but he followed patterns that could be predicted. After a week of training, something happened that surprised everyone. A new fighter arrived, a creature that looked like a walking mountain of rock and metal. It was called Krondar, and it had been undefeated in fights on 3 different worlds. The other gladiators were scared of it, but Jake saw something they missed. During training, Krondar knocked down everyone who faced it. But Jake noticed that the rock creature had trouble turning quickly, and it always took the same amount of time to swing its massive arms. When Krondar came after Jake, instead of running away or trying to fight it directly, Jake slipped between its legs and came up behind it. The crowd of gladiators watching the training went quiet. Gorvex was the first to speak. "How did you do that?" "No one has ever gotten behind Krondar." "I watched how it moves," Jake said simply. "Everything moves in patterns if you pay attention." From that day on, the other fighters started looking at Jake differently. He was still small and weak compared to them, but he had shown he could think in ways they couldn't. Veltar started asking him questions about human fighting techniques. Even Nexus 7 seemed interested in Jake's ability to spot patterns that its computers missed. But Thokmar was not happy about Jake getting attention from the other fighters. The arena master had been planning to throw the human into his first fight as a quick death to warm up the crowd. Now he wondered if this weak-looking creature might actually put up enough of a fight to be interesting. Tomorrow, Thokmar announced. To Jake's cell, you fight Crexton the spike thrower. He has killed 7 opponents in the last month. The crowds are excited to see what a human can do against a real warrior. Jake spent that night lying on his bed, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow, he would find out if everything he had learned was enough to keep him alive. He thought about his dead crew, about Earth so far away, and about all the aliens who expected him to die for their entertainment. He wasn't going to let any of them down. Jake woke up before dawn on the day of his first fight. His stomach felt sick, but he forced himself to eat the gray paste they gave him for breakfast. He would need all his strength for what was coming. The other gladiators in the cells around him were quieter than usual. Even the ones who had been making fun of him seemed to understand that today was different. Gorvex came over to the bars between their cells. Listen, human. Crexton is not like the fighters you faced in training. He has spikes all over his body that he can shoot like arrows. His skin is like armor, and he has killed many good warriors. If you want to live, you must move fast and never let him pin you down. Veltar dropped from her ceiling perch. The Vorthik are proud fighters. They like to make big shows of their strength before they kill. Use that against him. Let him waste energy trying to look impressive for the crowd. Even Nexus 7 shared information. Crexton typically fires 17 spikes in the first minute of combat. After that, he must wait 43 seconds for new ones to grow. That is your window of opportunity. Jake was surprised that his fellow prisoners were helping him. Why? Are you telling me this? I thought you all wanted me to die quickly. We did, Gorvex admitted. But you have shown us something new. The way you think, the way you see patterns we miss. If you can survive today, maybe you can teach us things. That will help us live longer too. 2 hours later, guards came to take Jake to the preparation chamber. They gave him basic leather armor that was too big for him, and a sword that was sharp, but nothing special. The shield was dented but solid. It wasn't much, but it was better than the broken training gear he had been using. Thokmar appeared in the doorway, his tree-like form casting long shadows. Ready to die for the entertainment of the masses, human? The betting pools have you losing in under 2 minutes. Some are even betting you will run away and refuse to fight. I won't run, Jake said quietly. We shall see. Thokmar's branch fingers clicked together. Crexton has requested permission to keep your skull as a trophy. I have agreed, since you will have no use for it after today. The roar of the crowd grew louder as Jake was led through tunnels toward the arena floor. When the gate finally opened, the sound hit him like a physical blow. 50,000 aliens from dozens of different species filled the seats, all of them screaming for blood. The arena floor was covered in sand that had been stained red from countless previous fights. The sun overhead was bright and hot, nothing like the gentle yellow sun of Earth. Jake stepped into the center and looked around at all the alien faces staring down at him. Most looked excited to see something new get killed. Others just looked bored, like this was going to be over too quickly to be interesting. A voice boomed across the arena, speaking in a language Jake didn't understand, but somehow knew was announcing the fighters. When his name was called, the crowd made sounds that might have been laughter, or might have been the alien version of booing. Then the gate on the other side opened, and Crexton walked out. Jake had seen Vorthik before, but Crexton was bigger than any of them. He stood 8 feet tall and was covered in dark purple armor that looked like it had grown from his skin. Sharp spikes stuck out from his shoulders, arms, and back, each one as long as Jake's hand. His face was hidden behind a metal mask, but his eyes glowed yellow through the slits. Crexton raised his 4 arms toward the crowd, and they screamed their approval. He was clearly a favorite. The alien warrior then turned to look at Jake, and even across the arena, Jake could feel the hatred and contempt in that stare. A horn sounded, and the fight began. Crexton immediately started shooting spikes at Jake, just as Nexus 7 had predicted. The sharp projectiles flew faster than arrows, but Jake was already moving. He had spent the morning studying the arena layout, noting every pillar, every rise and dip in the sand. While Crexton was trying to pin him down with spike fire, Jake was running in patterns that kept obstacles between him and his opponent. The crowd was not impressed. They wanted to see blood, not a human running around like a scared animal. But Jake was not just running randomly. He was counting the spikes and watching Crexton's movements, waiting for the right moment. After exactly 17 spikes had been fired, Jake saw his chance. Crexton paused to let new spikes grow, just as the cybernetic gladiator had said he would. Jake sprinted directly at his opponent, using his smaller size to stay below the alien's line of sight. But instead of attacking, Jake grabbed a handful of sand and threw it at Crexton's face mask. The alien roared and swung blindly with his massive arms. But Jake was already gone, circling around behind him. The crowd was getting more interested now. This was not how fights usually went. Most gladiators either charged straight at each other or tried to circle and look for openings. They had never seen someone use the arena itself as a weapon. Crexton cleared the sand from his eyes and turned to face Jake again. Now he was angry instead of confident. He charged forward, intending to crush the human with his bare hands. Jake waited until the last second, then dropped and rolled between the alien's legs. As Crexton tried to turn around, his feet slipped in the loose sand. Jake had been running in circles for a reason, kicking up the sand and making the footing unstable. The massive alien stumbled and went down on one knee. Jake saw his opening. Instead of going for a killing blow, he targeted the joint where Crexton's armor met at the elbow. His sword found the gap and sliced deep. Purple blood spurted out, and Crexton's right arm went limp. The arena fell completely silent. No one could believe what they were seeing. Crexton tried to get back up, but Jake was already moving again. A quick slash across the back of the alien's knee brought him down again. Another precise cut disabled his second right arm. Jake was not trying to torture his opponent, but he was making sure the fight was over. Finally, Jake stood in front of the defeated Crexton and placed his sword at the alien's throat. The crowd waited for the killing blow, the moment when the human would claim his victory in blood. Instead, Jake did something that had never been done in the arena of champions. He helped his opponent stand up. "You fought well," Jake said loud. Enough for the crowd to hear. But the fight is over. Crexton stared at him through his mask. "Why do you not kill me?" "It is your right as victor, because I don't have to," Jake replied. Winning doesn't always mean killing. The silence in the arena stretched on for long seconds. Then slowly, one alien in the crowd started making a sound. Others joined in until the entire stadium was making the same noise. Jake didn't know what it meant, but it didn't sound like anger or disappointment. Later, he would learn that the sound was the galactic equivalent of cheering. The crowd was not just impressed by his victory, but by something they had never seen before. Mercy in the arena. As Jake walked toward the exit gate, the crowd began chanting a word over and over. "Human, human." Back in the Gladiator cells, his fellow fighters were waiting for him. Gorvex was the first to speak. "I have fought in this arena for 2 years. I have never seen anything like what you did today. You not only won," Veltar added, "you made them respect you. That is worth more than 100 victories." Jake sat down on his bed, suddenly feeling very tired. He had survived his first fight, but he knew this was just the beginning. There would be more fights, stronger opponents, and eventually someone would find a way to beat him. But for today, he was alive. And somewhere in the galaxy, word was already spreading about the human gladiator who had shocked everyone by showing mercy to his defeated enemy. Word of Jake's first victory spread across the galaxy faster than light-speed communication could carry it. Within days, news broadcasts on hundreds of worlds were showing recordings of the human who had defeated Crexton and then helped him. Stand. Alien children practiced Jake's sand-throwing technique in their backyards. Military academies began studying his use of environmental tactics. Jake didn't know about any of this. He was focused on staying alive for his next fight. Thokmar was not happy that his plan for a quick human death had backfired so spectacularly. The arena master had lost money on the betting pools, and worse, Jake's mercy had made some of the crowd start questioning whether gladiator fights always had to end in death. That was bad for business. Your next opponent will not be so easy to defeat, Thokmar told Jake 3 days after the Crextan fight. Silthuk the Mindrider has never lost a match because he knows what his enemies will do before they do it. Let us see how your human cleverness works against someone who can see inside your thoughts. Jake had heard other gladiators talking about Silthuk in frightened whispers. The creature was from a species called the Zine Thari, and they all had the ability to read minds. No fighter had ever surprised Silthuk, because he always knew their battle plans in advance. But Jake had an idea. That night, instead of planning his fight strategy, he spent his time thinking about things that had nothing to do with fighting. He remembered Earth, picturing his childhood home and his favorite foods. He thought about old movies he had seen and books he had read. Most of all, he filled his mind with human sayings and jokes that would make no sense to an alien. When the fight began the next day, Silthuk tried to read Jake's mind as usual. The alien was tall and thin, with pale blue skin and large black eyes. He had tentacles instead of hair, and they moved like they were tasting the air around him. For the first minute of the fight, Silthuk looked confused. He kept tilting his head like he was trying to hear something that wasn't quite clear. Jake used this confusion to his advantage, moving in ways that seemed random, but were actually carefully planned. "I cannot see your intentions, human," Silthuk said during a pause in the fighting. "Your mind is full of strange images and sounds that make no sense." "Well, you know what they say," Jake replied, dodging a tentacle strike. "When life gives you lemons, make lemonade." Silthuk's confusion grew worse. What are lemons? What is lemonade? These concepts do not exist in any galactic database. Jake grinned and kept talking while he fought. "A bird in the hand is worth 2 in the bush. Don't count your chickens before they hatch. The early worm gets the bird." He was mixing up the sayings on purpose, filling his mind with nonsense that the Mindrider couldn't understand. The crowd was fascinated. They had never seen Silthuk look so lost and frustrated. The Mindrider was still dangerous, but without his ability to predict his opponent's moves, he was just another fighter. Jake managed to trip him with a move Silthuk never saw coming, and once again helped his defeated opponent to his feet. Jake's third fight was against Gorvex, his lizard neighbor from the cells. Neither of them wanted to hurt the other, but they had no choice. Thokmar had arranged the match specifically to force Jake to fight someone who had helped him. "Do not hold back because we are friends," Gorvex told Jake before the fight. "I would rather lose to you than to some stranger who will not show mercy." This fight was different from the others. Both fighters knew each other's strengths and weaknesses. Gorvex was powerful and tough, but Jake had superior endurance. Instead of trying to end the fight quickly, Jake turned it into a long battle of patience. For over an hour, they fought back and forth across the arena sand. Gorvex landed powerful blows that would have killed most opponents, but Jake kept moving and stayed just far enough away to avoid the worst damage. Meanwhile, Jake landed dozens of smaller hits that slowly wore down the big lizard's strength. The crowd loved it. This was the kind of long, dramatic fight they had paid to see. Both fighters showed skill and courage, and neither gave up even. When they were hurt and tired out finally, Gorvex collapsed from exhaustion. "I cannot continue, my friend. You have beaten me fairly." Jake helped him up, and the crowd cheered for both fighters. It was the first time in arena history that a crowd had cheered for the loser as much as the winner. After that fight, Jake's reputation changed completely. He was no longer seen as a weak newcomer who had gotten lucky. Other gladiators started asking for his advice on fighting techniques. Even some of the guards treated him with more respect. But Jake's biggest test came in his fifth fight, against 3 opponents at once. Thokmar had decided that since Jake kept winning his single matches, maybe he would lose if the odds were stacked against him. The 3 fighters were all dangerous in different ways. One was a massive rock creature like Krondar. Another was a fast insect-like being with poison stingers. The third was a warrior from a species that could change its shape to look like other beings. Jake knew he couldn't fight all 3 at once and win. So instead of fighting them, he talked to them. "They're making us fight for their entertainment," he called out loud enough for the crowd to hear. "But what if we gave them a different kind of show?" The shapeshifter was curious. "What do you mean? Human? What if we fought, but we also showed them something they've never seen before? Cooperation instead of just violence." It was a risky idea. The 3 aliens could have just attacked him while he was talking. But something about Jake's previous fights had earned him respect, even from opponents who had never met him. They were willing to listen. What followed was the strangest gladiator match in arena history. The 4 fighters did fight, but they also worked together to create an amazing display of skill and teamwork. They took turns showing off their best techniques, helped each other perform difficult moves, and turned the battle into something more like a dance than a death match. The crowd was confused at first and amazed. They had never seen anything like it. When it was over, all 4 fighters were declared winners, and the crowd gave them the longest standing ovation in arena history. In the VIP section of the arena, Senator Yuthran of the Zephyrian Council watched the match with great interest. She was one of the most powerful politicians in the galactic government, and she had come to see what all the excitement about this human was about. "Fascinating," she said to her aide. "This creature is not just a skilled fighter. He is changing the very nature of what these contests mean. I want to know everything about his species." Back in the gladiator cells, Jake was becoming something he had never expected to be: a teacher. Other fighters came to him for advice, not just on fighting techniques, but on ways of thinking they had never considered before. How do you stay hopeful when everything seems hopeless? Veltar asked him one evening. Jake thought about his dead crewmates, about Earth so far away, about all the fights still ahead of him. "I think about the people I'm fighting for," he said. "Even if I never see them again, I want to make them proud. And I think about making things better for the people around me, even if it's just a little bit." It was a very human way of thinking, and it was spreading through the arena like a virus. Gladiators who had spent years thinking only about their own survival were starting to help each other. Some were even refusing to kill defeated opponents, copying Jake's example of mercy. Thokmar was furious about these changes, but he couldn't do anything about them. Jake's fights were the most popular events in arena history. Tickets were selling out months in advance. Aliens were traveling from across the galaxy just to see the human gladiator fight. But Jake knew that his success was also making him a target. There were powerful people in the galaxy who didn't like the changes he was causing. They would find a way to stop him eventually. He just hoped he could make enough of a difference before they did. The Grand Championship came faster than Jake had expected. After winning 15 fights in 6 months, he had earned the right to challenge Zarthul the Destroyer for the title of Champion of the Galaxy. It was an honor that usually took gladiators years to achieve, if they lived long enough to achieve it at all. Zarthul had held the championship for 7 years. In that time, he had killed 43 challengers without ever showing mercy to any of them. The creature was 12 feet tall and came from a world where the gravity was 3 times stronger than Earth's. His species, the Korthnak, were born warriors with natural armor plating and claws that could slice through metal. Jake spent his last week of preparation differently than he had for any previous fight. Instead of just training his body and planning tactics, he spent time talking to every gladiator who had ever faced Zarthul and survived. There were only 3 of them. "He is not just strong," warned Nexus 7, whose mechanical parts still bore scars from his fight against the champion 2 years earlier. "He is intelligent and patient. He will not make the mistakes that your other opponents made. The crowd loves him," added Veiltar, who had lost her left wing in her championship attempt. "They want him to win. They will not cheer for mercy this time. They want to see you die." But it was Gorvex who gave Jake the most useful information. "I fought him when I was younger and more foolish. I learned something that might help you. Zarthul feeds on fear and pain. The more afraid his opponents are, the stronger he becomes. But he has never faced someone who refuses to be afraid." The night before the championship fight, Jake couldn't sleep. He sat in his cell thinking about everything that had led him to this moment. His crew on the horizon seemed like they had died years ago instead of months. Earth felt like a distant dream. The scared captain who had been captured by Zekthiel's raiders was gone, replaced by someone harder and more determined. But Jake realized he wasn't just fighting for himself anymore. In the cells around him, dozens of gladiators were lying awake, thinking about tomorrow's fight. If he won, it would prove that their new way of thinking about combat and mercy was not just naive foolishness. If he lost, especially if he died, the old brutal ways would return stronger than ever. The championship fight was held during the Festival of Worlds, when representatives from every species in the galaxy came to Vorthik Prime for political meetings and celebrations. The arena was packed with over 700,000 spectators, the largest crowd in its history. Jake had never seen so many different kinds of aliens in one place. There were beings made of living crystal, creatures that looked like walking trees, fish-like people in water-filled suits, and hundreds of others he couldn't even begin to describe. All of them had come to see if the human gladiator could do the impossible. In the VIP section, Senator Yithran sat with other high-ranking officials from the Galactic Council. She had been studying human culture for months, trying to understand what made Jake so different from other fighters. What she had learned worried her, because it suggested that humans might be more dangerous than anyone had realized. When Zarthul entered the arena, the crowd exploded with cheers. The champion was everything Jake had been told and worse. His black armor looked like it had been carved from solid rock, and his red eyes glowed with an inner fire. When he roared at the crowd, the sound was so loud it made the arena walls shake. Jake's entrance was much quieter. He walked to the center of the arena, wearing simple leather armor and carrying the same basic weapons he had used in all his fights. Compared to Zarthul, he looked like a child about to fight a monster. The crowd noise died down as the 2 fighters faced each other. Zarthul studied Jake with the patience of a predator that had killed many prey. "So you are the human everyone is talking about. You look even smaller than I expected." "Size isn't everything," Jake replied calmly. Zarthul laughed, a sound like rocks falling down a mountain. "We shall see. I have killed beings much larger and stronger than you. What makes you think you can succeed where they failed?" "Because I'm not trying to be larger or stronger than you," Jake said. I'm trying to be smarter." The horn sounded, and the fight began. Zarthil moved faster than anything that Big should have been able to move. His first attack would have cut Jake in half if it had connected, but Jake was already rolling away before the claws came down. The champion's second attack shattered the stone floor where Jake had been standing a split second earlier. For the first 10 minutes of the fight, Jake did nothing but dodge and run. The crowd grew restless, booing what they saw as cowardice. They wanted to see a real fight, not a human running away from the champion. But Jake was not running randomly. He was studying Zarthul's movement patterns, looking for weaknesses in the creature's seemingly perfect fighting style. More importantly, he was testing something Gorvex had told him about fear. Every time Zarthul attacked, Jake responded not with fear, but with curiosity. When the champion's claws missed his head by inches, Jake analyzed the angle and speed of the strike. When the creature's roar tried to intimidate him, Jake listened to the sound like he was studying music. Slowly, Jake began to notice something strange. Zarthul was getting more aggressive, but also more sloppy. The champion was used to opponents who became more frightened as the fight went on. Jake's calm analysis was confusing him. "Fight me properly, coward," Zarthul snarled after a particularly wild swing that Jake easily avoided. "Stop running and face me like a warrior." "I am fighting you," Jake said, deflecting a claw strike with his shield. "Just not the way you expected." That was when Jake began his real attack. Instead of trying to match Zarthul's strength, he used the champion's own power against him. When the creature charged, Jake sidestepped and helped the momentum carry Zarthul into a pillar. When the champion swung his massive fists, Jake ducked and let the force of the blow throw Zarthul off balance. The crowd began to understand what they were seeing. This was not cowardice, it was strategy. Jake was fighting a battle of patience and intelligence against raw power and aggression. But Zarthul was not stupid, and he began to adapt to Jake's tactics. The champion slowed down his attacks, became more careful, tried to corner Jake where he couldn't dodge. The fight entered a new phase where both fighters were testing each other's limits. That was when Jake made his mistake, trying to avoid one. Of Zarthul's more careful attacks, he slipped in the sand and fell. The champion was on him instantly, pinning him to the ground with claws at his throat. "Now you die, little human," Zarthul growled. "Any last words for your pathetic species?" Jake looked up at the creature that was about to kill him, and he thought about his grandfather. The old man had fought in Earth's last great war and had told Jake stories about never giving up, even when everything seemed hopeless. "My grandfather always said that humans don't know when to quit," Jake gasped out. I guess he was right. Instead of trying to break free from Zarthul's grip, Jake did something completely unexpected. He grabbed the champion's arm and pulled himself closer, driving his knee up into the one spot where Zarthul's armor had a gap at the joint. The champion roared in pain and loosened his grip just enough for Jake to roll away. Both fighters got back to their feet, but now Zarthul was limping and favoring his injured leg. The final phase of the fight was brutal and desperate. Both fighters were hurt and tired, but neither would give up. Jake's armor was torn, and he was bleeding from multiple cuts. Zarthul was moving slower, but his attacks were still powerful enough to kill Dot in the end. It came down to one last exchange. Zarthul charged with everything he had left, intending to crush Jake against the arena wall. Jake waited until the last possible second, then dropped and rolled between the champion's legs, just as he had done against Krondar in his first fight. But this time, as he rolled, Jake drove his sword up into the gap in Zarthul's armor at the back of his knee. The champion crashed into the wall and collapsed, his leg no longer able to support his weight. The arena fell completely silent. For the first time in 7 years, Zarthul the destroyer was down and unable to get up. Jake stood over the fallen champion, his sword pointed at Zarthul's throat. The crowd waited to see if he would show mercy to a creature who had never shown mercy to anyone. "You fought well," Jake said, lowering his weapon. "But it's over." For a moment, Zarthul just stared at him. Then, incredibly, the former champion began to laugh. "You are either the bravest creature I have ever met, or the most foolish. I am not sure which." "Maybe both," Jake replied, helping Zarthul sit up against the wall. The crowd erupted in the loudest cheer in arena history. Jake Morrison, a human from a species that most of the galaxy had never heard of 6 months earlier, was now the champion of the galaxy. Jake's victory over Zarthul sent shockwaves across the galaxy that reached far beyond the arena. Within hours of the fight, emergency sessions were being called in the Galactic Council. Military leaders were demanding immediate studies of human capabilities. Scientists were asking how a species that had barely achieved faster-than-light travel could produce such a formidable warrior. But Jake knew nothing of the chaos his victory had caused. He spent his first night as champion in the same cell he had occupied for months, talking with his fellow gladiators, who were celebrating like they had won the title themselves. "You have done something that will be remembered forever," Gorvex told him. "Not just because you won, but because of how you won. You showed mercy to every opponent, even Zarthul. You have changed what it means to be a champion." Nexus 7's mechanical parts whirred as he processed the implications. "Analysis indicates your victory will have consequences extending far beyond this arena. The Galactic Imperium's power structure is based on the assumption that newer species are weaker than older ones. You have proven that assumption false." 3 days after the championship fight, Senator Yithron came to visit Jake in his cell. She was a tall, elegant being with pale green skin and large silver eyes. Her species, the Zephyrians, were known throughout the galaxy as diplomats and scholars. "I have been studying your species for months," she told Jake. "What I have learned concerns me greatly." Jake was surprised by her honesty. Most of the officials he had met spoke in riddles and half-truths. "What concerns you about humans?" "Everything," Yithrin replied. "Your physical capabilities are remarkable. You have better endurance than most species, faster reflexes than many, and pain tolerance that borders on the impossible. But those are not what worry me most." She paused and looked directly at Jake. "What worries me is how you think. Your ability to adapt, to find patterns others miss, to turn disadvantages into advantages. Most species develop one primary survival: strategy, and stick with it. Humans seem to have developed the ability to change strategies constantly. Is that bad?" Jake asked. "That depends on what your species does with it," Yithron said. "I have been receiving reports from across the galaxy. Human ships have been spotted in dozens of systems that we thought were too far from Earth for you to reach. Your people have been watching us much longer than we have been watching you." Jake tried to keep his expression neutral, but inside he was excited. If human ships were exploring the galaxy, that meant Earth was not defenseless. His sacrifice in the arena might not have been for nothing. Yithran continued. "Our xenobiologists have been studying the recordings of your fights. They believe humans have evolved as what they call persistence predators. You are designed to chase prey over long distances until it collapses from exhaustion. That explains your endurance and your ability to keep fighting when others would give up. But you are also pattern hunters," she added. "Your brains are designed to spot weaknesses and opportunities that other species miss. Combined with your physical abilities, this makes you naturally excellent warriors." That evening, Thokmar came to Jake's cell with news that surprised everyone. "You are to be released from the arena, human. By order of the Galactic Council, champions may now retire if they choose to do so." Jake stared at the arena master. That's never been allowed before. Many things are changing because of you, Thokmar said bitterly. The council has also ruled that gladiators may no longer be forced to fight to the death. Mercy is now permitted in all matches. It was everything Jake had hoped for, but he found himself reluctant to leave. What about the others? What about my friends here? Those who wish to continue fighting may do so under the new rules, Thokmar explained. Those who wish to leave may purchase their freedom with their winnings. And those who have no money may work for the arena in other capacities. Jake looked around at the gladiators who had become his family. I want to make sure they're all taken care of before I go. The next few weeks were busy ones. Jake used his status as champion to negotiate better conditions for all the gladiators. He established a fund to help retired fighters find new lives outside the arena. Most importantly, he convinced the arena management to start training programs that would teach fighting skills without requiring actual death matches. But the most significant meeting came when Admiral Carter Blake of the Earth Defense Force arrived on Vorthik Prime. Jake had never been so happy to see another human being. Captain Morrison, Admiral Blake said with a smile, you've been making quite a name for yourself out here. Admiral, how did you find me? How did you even know I was alive? Son, your fights have been broadcast across half the galaxy. Every human settlement from here to Alpha Centauri has been watching you kick alien tail for months. Blake's expression grew more serious. What you've done here has given humanity credibility we never could have earned through diplomacy alone. Blake explained that human exploration fleets had been making contact with various alien species for over a year, but they had been largely ignored or dismissed as primitive newcomers. Jake's victories had changed everything. The Galactic Council has offered humanity a full membership, Blake told him. Not as junior partners or probationary members, but as equals. Senator Yithrin herself sponsored the proposal. Jake felt a mix of pride and relief. So Earth is safe? More than safe. 3 different alien species have requested defensive alliances with us. Apparently, they want humans on their side if there's ever a war. Blake chuckled. They're calling us the warrior species that shows mercy. That's a reputation we can live with. On his last day in the arena, Jake stood in the center of the fighting floor where he had won so many battles. The sand had been cleaned and raked smooth, ready for the next generation of fighters who would compete under the new rules he had helped create. Gorvex, Veltar, Nexus 7, and dozens of other gladiators came to say goodbye. Many of them were leaving. The arena, too, ready to start new lives in a galaxy that had been changed by their human friend. You came here as a prisoner, Gorvex said. You leave as a champion and a liberator. That is something no one can ever take away from you. Jake shook hands, claws, tentacles, and various other appendages as he said farewell to each of his friends. Then he walked toward the exit that would take him back to the stars. Senator Yithron was waiting for him at the spaceport, along with Admiral Blake and a small fleet of human ships that would escort him home. I have one last question for you, Jake Morrison, Yithrin said. Your species had no idea that any of this would happen when you were captured. You were just an explorer looking for new worlds. Yet you managed to change the fundamental structure of galactic civilization. How? Jake thought for a moment. I think it's because we're stubborn. Humans don't like being told we can't do something, especially when people are counting on us. My crew died believing I would find a way to make their sacrifice mean something. I couldn't let them down. And mercy? Yithrin asked. Where did that come from? That's human too, Jake said. We know what it's like to be hurt and afraid. When we see someone else in that situation, even an enemy, something in us wants to help. Maybe that makes us weak, or maybe it makes us strong. I'm not sure it matters which. As his ship lifted off from Vorthik Prime, Jake looked down at the arena that had been his home for so many months. He had entered it as a prisoner and a victim. He was leaving as a champion and a diplomat, carrying news that would change Earth's place in the galaxy forever. But more than that, he was carrying proof of something his species had always believed, but never been able to demonstrate on such. A scale, that strength without mercy was just brutality, that winning without honor was just survival, and that the greatest victories came not from destroying your enemies, but from earning their respect. The human ships turned toward Earth, carrying Jake home to a world that was no longer alone in the universe. Behind them, the galaxy watched and wondered what other surprises the newcomer species might have. In the arena, far below, a new group of gladiators was beginning their training under rules that emphasized skill over slaughter, competition, over killing. They called it the Morrison method, though Jake would have been embarrassed to know that the first human in the arena had indeed shocked the galaxy. But more than that, he had changed it. And in a universe where change was rare, and usually violent, that was perhaps the most shocking thing of all.